a podcast about amazing people from an incredible state. Join Mike Broomhead for Amazing Arizonans, presented by Resolution Copper. Copper is essential to Arizona's economy and to America's future. Learn more at resolutioncopper.com.
Another episode of Amazing Arizonans, a podcast we're doing to tell great stories, and it would be hard to cover the bases of Amazing Arizonans without talking to this guy, Rick Smith from Axon. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Mike.
I want to get to the backstory. We're going to bounce around a lot, I'm sure, but you and I met years ago. I don't know if you remember it, but it was back when your company was still called Taser, and everybody knew you for that self-defense, less lethal. But I don't know that people understand the really humble beginnings. I mean, you literally started in a garage. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, we started in a garage in Tucson. So I was 23 years old, and I knew a couple guys who were shot and killed in high school, and then I did a year abroad in Europe, and just had a number of things happen over there that sort of drove home to me that we do have a problem with violent crime in the U.S. And the thing that struck me is like, well, goodness, like, why don't we have Captain Kirk's phaser yet? Like, we've been shooting each other with bullets for 1,000 years. We fought the Brits in the plains of the Northeast, 250 years ago. Back then, medicine was, a swig of whiskey and a saw, and transportation was a horse if you're lucky. And now we're riding in rocket ships, and we've got personalized genomics and all kinds of advances everywhere else. And so is that kind of simple insight led me to start doing some research, and I discovered that this thing called the Taser had existed since the late 1960s. But look, a lot of times early tech is kind of buggy and doesn't work super well. The guy who invented it was at one point in time one of the lead scientists on the Apollo moon landing program. It almost starts to sound like a Marvel comic book plot. But I was doing a patent search at ASU Library because the internet did not yet exist. And I came across a patent for this guy, Jack Cover, related to the Taser. And it was, his home address was listed as Tucson. And so I called 411 and I was like, hey, give me this guy's phone number.
There are people that don't know what 411 is.
I know. It makes me feel old. We have to
Me
explain.
too.
See, before Google, you'd pick up your phone. Actually, I was just having this conversation a couple of days ago, and somebody was telling me his wife is still a heavy 411 user, which is crazy.
I didn't even know it still existed.
Yeah, I didn't think it worked anymore. Maybe I was getting punked. Anyway, I went down to Tucson. I was 23. He was 73. We made this sort of weird odd couple where he was at the end of his career, very frustrated that the Taser had not gone anywhere.
Was it called the Taser originally? Did you
was.
keep the original name?
We did. And actually, there's a funny story. When I first heard about this, I envisioned, like, Taser is such a phenomenal brand, like Coca-Cola, right?
Right.
It's a Coke. It's a Taser. I envisioned they must have hired some Madison Avenue ad agency. But like many great things in life, no, there's just some entrepreneurs who figured it out. And what's really funny was, so the name, do you know what the name stands for?
No.
It actually stands for Thomas A. Swift's electric rifle.
Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah, kind of crazy. And it turns out there was a science fiction series in books. This is before TV, even before radio. In the early 1900s, there was a book series about a comical character named Tom Swift. He was like a boy inventor, kind of like you might have in modern movies. And one of his books was about Tom Swift and his electric rifle. And Jack Cover, the inventor of the Taser, grew up in the 1920s and 30s reading these Tom Swift novels. And so when he read that President Lyndon Johnson had commissioned basically a presidential commission on violence in America and crime in America, and they had concluded that one of the things the country needed was a non-lethal weapon, Jack says, wait a minute, we could use electricity, like that inspiration from my childhood. So the original name of the company was TSER Systems, like T.S.E.
Right.
They must have gotten tired of saying, hi, I'm from TSER Systems. So they threw the A in just to make it an acronym so they could say Taser. And that's where the name came from.
So you met up with him because you had the idea that this needed to be mass-produced and modernized. How long did it take you from the first meeting to actually start getting a product you knew could go to market?
Well, one interesting thing is when you are an entrepreneur and you get started, you move at light speed. I always get, frankly, frustrated. No offense to any of my engineers who are listening, but look, the bigger the team, the slower it goes, the longer things take. So I met Jack on on September 15th. Took me a month to negotiate the deal. Why would he want to work with some crazy 23-year-old kid? Well, I just kept calling him every couple of days. My wife probably has a similar story. I didn't take no. and then on October 15th, we signed our deal. And then we started working out of his garage, and we built the first functioning prototype in 30 days and shipped it to Washington, D.C. for regulatory approval. So we were moving fast. We had the product ready to ship a year later. Now, unfortunately, our first product was a commercial failure. Our second product, 2-3 years later, was also a commercial failure. So we got a product out in a year, but it took us 7 years to figure out a product that people would actually buy. And that was our third product when we entered policing.
What was it about the third product that was different from the beginning that made it marketable and made it a commercial success?
Yeah, so here's the shocking thing. The big magic sauce was it worked.
Huh.
Yeah. Like the early taser, Rodney King was shot with an early taser, one before I was in the business. And I remember when I met the inventor, I asked him, I said, hey, man, like, if you say the word taser, the two words people are likely to respond with is Rodney King, because he was shot with a taser, and it didn't work. And those officers, they went to their batons with pretty catastrophic effect.
Yeah.
By the way, not to go down a rat hole, but those officers behaved the way they were trained. LAPD, because they'd taken away the chokehold, among other things, their training was, if you go to the baton, beat until submission. Now, I'm not excusing
behavior.
I'm just saying, like, the agency was probably more to blame than the individuals there, because they did what they were trained to do. Okay, anyway, everybody knew the taser had failed. And when I asked Jack Cover about that, he said, oh, yeah, well, the batteries were dead. Remember the old Nike had batteries? They have memory problems. They wouldn't hold a charge. I said, oh, that feels reasonable. Okay. And I didn't think about it again. So we went on to build our first product using the same electrical output specs as his original product. And then after it was done, I did some demos where turns out it was underpowered. It caused a painful shock, but somebody who's really motivated, like Rodney King, who, look, was probably under the influence of drugs, was in the fight or flight moment.
Right.
He did not want to go to jail, right? That's a very different person than when you just hit some random dude in a demo. And what I realized is motivated people could fight through the old taser. That's the thing we fixed. In our third generation product, we went and we did some animal testing to really tune this thing to hit the motor nerves that control your muscles, because we weren't interested in causing pain. We're interested in causing paralysis.
Right.
And that's what we did
as
in 99.
temporary as it is.
Yeah, it's like a light switch. In fact, I just was looking at an old video of a buffalo that Jack, the inventor, one of the things he showed me early on was he'd built a buffalo gun. And it's like a light switch. You hit the buffalo, it goes down to the ground. He turns it off, it gets up. You hit it again, it goes down. It's very much like right now, my brain is sending electric signals to curl my fingers in. When I stop, it's over. Taser does the same thing. If anything, one of the challenges we have is the public sees movies and has this expectation, oh, you hit them and then they're stunned and they're down for minutes. No, their muscles are cramping uncontrollably while the taser's on, but as soon as it's off, the fight is back on.
Right.
And there's two outcomes from that actually make a challenge. Number one, I got to train cops. Hey, this is not a spectator sport. When you use the taser, it's go time. Have a plan, an arrest plan, have your other officers getting them handcuffed. Don't stand around and watch. And we also have to set public expectations. Hey, when you hear the cops had to hit somebody more than once or twice, don't assume it's because they're being abusive. It's probably because they're dealing with somebody that is in a condition where they couldn't easily get the cuffs on.
But it's also, there is a deterrent, because much like a canine, when an officer tells a suspect that's fleeing, we're going to release the dogs, it stops a lot of people because they know what's going to happen. Anybody that's seen the video or been tased doesn't ever want to feel that again. So when they tase a suspect, is this by design? When the suspect is tased and you release the pressure and warn them, if you're not compliant, we're going to hit you again.
Oh, yeah.
That's got to be the deterrent that says, I don't want to ever feel that again.
100%. And in fact, even for people who haven't felt it, in our latest taser, we actually built in a sound effect. And it's really funny. We watched a bunch of science fiction films, and we're like, okay, what sound does it make when a stormtrooper arms his weapon or something? And it's all pretty similar. I don't want to try to make it with my mouth,
Right.
but sort of
Yeah.
like when you arm a weapon, you hear it charge up. And so we leaned into that. We're like, well, what if we put that into the weapon and we took advantage of all the training of all these science fiction films? So
And it's just a sound effect.
just a sound effect. And we have about a 90% surrender rate. Because
Yeah.
people hear, they go, oh, that doesn't sound good. I don't think I want any of that.
But it motivated an entire industry because I'm sure there were people doing research, but once this became successful and law enforcement saw this as a viable option, all of these other less lethal means were then mass produced. And you were a big part of some of those as well, weren't you? Or was it just Taser?
Really, on the non-lethal weapon sides, we've stayed focused on just Taser. Now, we created the body camera space and a whole bunch of stuff.
Which
with
I
AI
want to
and
get to
software,
that
but
because it's incredible. But the other things, when you have the pepper balls and you have the rubber balls and you have the different tools that police officers are now seeing are valuable tools
Yep.
where you can incapacitate or stop a suspect without using deadly force. So you aren't jumping from the baton to the handgun.
Exactly.
Giving them that option has got to be a relief for officers as well, because contrary to public opinion, cops are not looking forward to taking someone's life.
Well, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
Police are more scared today of what will happen to them legally than what will happen to them physically. They're more concerned about, and then you've got states like Colorado that got rid of qualified immunity. Just a terrible idea. And what qualified immunity says, like, look, if you're a cop and you do something terrible, like you can go to jail, et cetera, but your family is shielded unless you did something really egregious. If you were within agency policy, they can't come take your house and wipe out your
Right.
family. Colorado took that away. Now, what do you think that does in terms of their ability to recruit good people to want to be police officers, where it's like, well, I'm going to put my personal self at risk. I'm going to put my life and liberty at risk. I'm going to go to risk of jail if I, make a mistake that comes back to haunt me. And now I can put my whole family at risk. Like, you have a hard time convincing people to go do that job. And the number one thing, if you want to make policing better, you want good people going into the profession.
Right.
Not people who can't get another job.
And
by the way, I continue to see the people who go into policing are, by and large, amazing people.
They are. And my brother's a cop. My sister-in-law are both cops in Florida where I grew up. My brother's a captain in the sheriff's office, and he's a good person. He doesn't want to be any more physical than he needs to be with someone, and he prefers none at all. That's just the way he's always been in his life, and he's still that way as a cop. But you also need to know that you have the ability to protect yourself or your other cops around you if you need to. And I think the tools that you offer, and I want to get to the body cam, the Axon part of this in a minute, but before we do that, I want to ask you about Arizona, because part of this being this Amazing Arizona podcast, whether we get into the fight of what's happened recently or not, I don't know, but you want to be in Arizona business. You started here. You want to stay here. Why is that so important to you?
So I moved around a lot growing up. My dad was a serial entrepreneur, and he had quite an amazing personality. So he was either leaving to start an entrepreneurial venture, and they would usually fail, and then he'd have to go get a job, and then he'd get fired, and he'd go start another one. So we moved out every 2 years. My grandparents lived in Arizona, and it was the one place we always kept coming back to. And then my dad finally had one of his ventures hit up in Silicon Valley in 1986 or 85. And so he made a little bit of money, and he's like, I can move wherever I want to, and we moved to Arizona. And I've just always loved it here. It felt like we were coming home. Look, we host conferences here. I'll tell you, the chief of police from San Jose came out here for a conference we had. And he grabbed me at the end of the conference and he said, you know what? We noticed there's no graffiti out here. Like, this is like California was back in the day before it got overgrown and, rampant crime and vandalism. And he and his wife made a comment. They're like, hey, we'll see who the first person is to see graffiti. And over like a 2 or 3 day trip, they didn't see any. And then they ended up moving here to retire.
Yeah.
And so I am a big fan of Arizona. It's very new and clean compared to most states. I think part of that's because it didn't really grow till air conditioning became, practical. And yeah, I'm just a huge fan. The weather's great. I'm one of these people. I'm happy when the sun's
People
out.
are amazing.
People are amazing.
They are. I fell in love when I came here first time in 1992 on vacation. I moved here in 95. I loved where I grew up. So there's always that romance about where you grew up. But being here, it's just I fell in love the first time I came here.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to.
Me too. Well, when we moved here in 1986, I was in high school. And look, any kid in high school, you're like, well, Arizona's been great, but I'm in school. My dad says, well, just come check it out. And he took me to Chaparral High School. And to be honest, at that point, I was like, oh my God, the girls out here are unbelievably just attractive.
Yeah.
And I've actually found that I think in general, in warmer climates, and Arizona in particular, people take good care of themselves. And I think, look, we can complain about whether that's shallow or not, but when you take good care of yourself, you're happier, you're more fit, you live longer, you're healthier. And like I've noticed, even, with my own family through the pandemic and otherwise, we've moved around, we spent a year living in Europe. When you're in colder climates, you just don't have as much incentive to take as good a care of yourself as, when you're in Arizona.
When you, the early goals, when you did this, did you ever imagine it would turn into what it's become as far as the financial success and the international success of the business? But was that ever the goal? What was the original goal of producing this product?
So the goal was to ultimately bring Captain Kirk's phaser to life and to make the idea of having to kill people in self-defense obsolete. Like,
was it for law enforcement or was it for personal use?
No, it was for consumers.
Yeah,
it was for consumers. My mom, so when I was living in Europe, I mentioned that I was having these discussions about gun violence in America. There was an article I read in the Wall Street Journal, European edition, that gave the stat there had been 37,000 people died of bullet wounds in the U.S. in 1 year. That's 5 times the annual death rate in the Vietnam War. And by the way, I'm not anti-gun by any stretch. Like, my dad was in the military. We had guns in the household growing up. But it was like I'm not against horses, but I'd rather drive a car. Not against guns, but hey, I'd far rather have Captain Kirk's phaser. And so it did start as very kind of mission driven. But look, we're not a nonprofit as well. And I think this is actually, I'm a delusionally optimistic capitalist. Like, if you have a problem you want to solve, if you form a nonprofit, what that actually means is you're going to spend your life dialing people begging for money. I have friends who run nonprofits. Like, it's rough. It's not glamorous. You're constantly asking for money. If you can take a problem you're passionate about, like in my case, violence or gun violence, and wrap a business model around it, it funds itself.
It does.
And you get this feedback loop where, like, look, in order for us to sell stuff, and we've found our real home, we failed in consumer. We have a small consumer business, but police is the big business. You get this feedback loop where they're telling you what they need. If you build it, you're probably solving a problem that matters to them. They will buy it. You'll make more money. And then you go, okay, what's the next problem?
Right.
What's the next thing we want to work on? In my career, early on, I would say we had a couple boondoggles. That's the wrong word. A couple dead ends where we were like, hey, we just need to make some money here. And every time I've tried to make money in life, it never works out. The universe just slaps me. It's like, stop it. Go do things that matter. And if we solve problems that matter, then we end up making money.
There's got to be a lot of satisfaction. You told me the story. I can't remember if you said it on the air or off the air, of a police officer, and it's probably happened more than once, saying to you, thanking you, that your product stopped him from having to take someone's life.
Oh, yeah. I never want to become numb to it because every one of those stories is really meaningful. But yeah, it happens all the time. We just had our big conference here in Arizona a couple weeks ago, and I probably had at least 2 dozen officers come up and tell me stories about how we helped them not have to kill somebody.
Is that the satisfaction you were hoping for day one when you were bugging the guy on the phone? Is that what you were hoping for?
Yeah. So if we
not
go back
cops
there,
necessarily, but
I don't know that I was wise enough to sort of see that as the benefit would be. I think a lot of it was like, we're going to make a product, it's going to go out and sell well. And I would say originally I had this delusional optimism. I thought this taser is so fantastic. If we can just solve the legal problem so people can buy this, they're going to fly off the shelves. But they didn't. And that was like, initially, I think I thought, like, we're going to be bigger than Microsoft. This will be so big with this problem we're solving.
Yeah.
And then we launched our first product. We shot Steve Filmer, the local news reporter on Channel 12. And we had actually rented out a call center because we were like convinced we were going to blow up all the phone lines. And we all sat there. It was like 30 of us watching the phone after the news story read. Nothing for like 5 minutes. Then a phone finally rings. I grab the first call, and it's my mom. Hey, Ricky, did anybody call? How many did you sell? I'm like, oh, Mom, you're the only person the whole night, the only person that called was my mom. So then I would say the next 7 years, were stark. Then it was like you start feeling like you're banging your head against the wall, and you start to lose hope. And then we finally fixed the underlying tech problem so the thing worked properly and could stop people like a Rodney King. And then the business really took off. And then I would say ever since then, I've been much more humble and legitimately so, and did not ever see it other than my initial delusion as a 23-year-old. After that moment of reality, I never thought it would be as big as it is now.
So I've never asked you this, and it may be too personal of a question, but I'm sure over the years you've had offers to sell. When you started gaining success, I'm sure there were a lot of entrepreneurs that wanted to jump on you and take it. Why not? What motivated you to stay in it and keep doing it?
We have never had a legitimate offer.
Really?
Well, nope, we've never had a legitimate offer to buy the business.
That is, I almost said shocks me, but I didn't. But that surprises me.
Well, there was one. I paused for a second. So if we roll way back to the late 1990s, I'm 7 years into this thing, and we're running out of cash. I'm fatigued, and we demonstrated this new high-powered taser, and we hit a super badass Marine, chief combat instructor for the Marine Corps, and we knocked him on his butt. And we were pretty excited about the tech, but I'd bled my parents dry, and I didn't think we had enough money to make it. And so we went to a company called Armor Holdings. They were the market leader in like holsters and body armor. They owned the Monadnock baton. They were kind of the 800-pound gorilla. And we went to them, and we offered to sell them the business for about $2 million. Because at that point, I just wanted to get some money back from my parents because I'd wiped them out. And we were prepared to sell at that price. Luckily, they didn't take it. And one of the reasons was that company had invented the retention holster, which is, where for listeners who don't know what that is, like a big problem for a cop is they get assaulted with their own gun. And the way you stop that is you basically design a holster where there's little tricks to how to get the gun out. If you don't know them, you can't get the gun out. It's kind of like a combination lock, but you got to know where to press and turn. Saved a lot of cops' lives. But they said, look, the retention holster took us like 5 years to get any sort of adoption. This taser thing's just bat crazy. They're going to hit people with electricity. It's going to take decades. And thank goodness they didn't buy it, because what they could have bought for $2 million is now worth $50 billion. Right. So that worked out well. But beyond that, I think the reason
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this company, in my opinion, doesn't grow to what it's grown into if it doesn't have the passion that you have behind it. So somebody that would take that product as something that's a piece of their business compared to someone that had the passion for what you've done with it, don't you at least give yourself the credit for that part of it?
No, that's 100% true. So, and it's not just me. I mean, culturally, we are missionaries. And what I mean by that is, like, we learned early on, we can't sell through distributors. Every product we launch starts with no. I remember a cop telling me when he saw the taser for the first time, he said, "This is America, son. We're not going to electrocute people." Like, no, it seemed kind of crazy. But, as we dug in, it's like, well, what are the alternatives? And this can be much safer. Let me show you how it works. Body cameras. That started with, what? You want me to wear a camera all day? Hell no. And so to do that, you need missionary people. Mm-hmm. Like, we could, if we were part of some big business, like when we would sell through a distributor, they'd hear no, and they'd be like, okay, you want to buy a duty belt or something else. We got nothing else to sell. So, you're a missionary. It's like, no is just the start of the conversation. You got to work through it. And then coming back to why I don't think anybody's given us any serious offers to buy us, the taser business scares people. Like, we get sued a lot. And in a country where litigation is such a big problem, most companies, and certainly every company that's big enough to buy us, is terrified of the risk of the types of lawsuits we get. For us, we're Brer Rabbit. It's like, we get sued. Yeah. Yep, we got it. It's like, we know how to do this. We've been doing it long enough. And look, the science is overwhelmingly on our side. I've been shot with the taser 8 times. I'm actually filming my own little podcast series. We're going to do a sub-series called Unbelievably Safe, because that's true. This weapon it is safer than collegiate volleyball, statistically. But there's a certain group of folks who have negative views of police and for-profit companies, and they just can't believe it. To them, it's a conspiracy. This thing, it uses electricity. It's got to be dangerous. It's killing people. And you can show them data till the cows come home, thousands of pages of scientific studies, and they just won't believe it.
Why 8 times? I was going to ask you if you ever had been, but I figured the answer was yes. Why 8? I got tased once. I will never do that again.
Once is curious, twice is stupid.
Yes.
So let's see. Basically, a couple times early on, when we were trying to figure out how to make these things work better, we did like the old Pepsi Coke challenge.
So you were the crash test dummy for your own company.
I was, but that only was like 2. After 2, and we were drinking Jack Daniels and listening to Guns N' Roses and taking shocks on the forearm. And it did that twice. I was like, we got to find a better way. And so that's when we found a research doctor out of Nebraska to help us do pig testing. And by the way, the pigs never felt pain. We'd knock them out. We were not going to develop the future phaser through Jack Daniels and, sampling on ourselves. And then after that, it was when we'd launch a major new product, I would typically feel like, I should go first and show people that we really believe it's safe. And so that has ended up, we've had enough new products that it's totaled 8. I think I'm done. Yeah. I think the point's been made and I don't have to do it because it does suck. It's not fun.
And you're the boss. I mean, you could hire someone to do it.
Yeah, but then you're not leading from the front and they shame me into it. They're like, come on, Rick, this one's new. It's not like the last one. You gotta try it.
It hurts bad enough. I'd be okay being shamed and not leading from the front.
Yeah. Have you ever done pepper spray?
Yes.
I hear that's worse. I've never done it. It's worse because it lasts so long.
It lasts so long. And the only way really to get it out is time and maybe water. And then how do you keep your eyes open to pour water on your face? So no, that's not.
Yeah, I won't do pepper spray. Yeah. Hey, there's no reason for me to, but that looks like a pain train. The taser, it's 5 seconds. I wouldn't even know if I'd say it's super painful. It's just
the involuntary language with the taser that got me too.
I remember one time when I got hit, my right arm shot out. I'd been shot in the back. My right arm shot out in this weird contracted position, and time slows down, right? Because you're in this crisis mode. And I had this whole conversation with myself. I'm like, this is what Stephen Hawking must feel like. He, because he always has his hand
right,
in that
and you wonder if that's
position. And I had this whole thing and then I got embarrassed. I'm like, this is embarrassing. Like this is an awkward looking position, and I'm trying to undo it, and I can't. And again, it was a very weird experience, and then it was over.
What's weird about it is that experience is also how clear-minded you are. That I was an electrician before I was in radio, and I got shocked really bad on a job site once, and I was onto something that I couldn't let go of. And my mind was very clear, but like you said, I had to jump off a ladder in order to let go. But my mind was very clear. My body couldn't move.
Yep.
And that feeling felt the same way, is that you're tensed up, but you're not, your mind is still, unfortunately, the realization of the pain is very, very clear.
Yep. Well, I'm going to give you a little sneak preview. Next year, we are going to be doing some new things in the consumer space. We went into law enforcement to prove that these weapons were a viable competitor to the bullet. And as part of our plan, what we had to do in policing is we had to shoot a lot of cops with tasers to convince them that it works. We know in the consumer space, that's probably a little bit too much. So we're building Thor's throne. It's going to be a chair with Thor's hammer. And for those who want to try it, you'll have to sign the waiver, just like when you rent a pair of skis. But you won't be able to fall down because you'll be sitting in a chair. And if you grab the hammer, it'll have an actuator on it and somebody from the stores can have to put the safety pin in, so we'll have all the controls. But basically, once you grab it, it's going to do that same thing to you. And for 5 seconds, you will not be able to let go. And we'll have prizes for anybody who can let go. That's going to be kind of a fun thing. If you're interested, when we get the thing pulled together, we can come in and do some sort of fun event. We'll get some volunteers from the public.
Okay, I thought you were asking me to volunteer, and that was going to be
you should absolutely do it.
Hard no.
I'm not doing it, but you should.
Hard no. So I want to shift to the body-worn camera part of it, because you brought up an excellent point that you said your products always start with a no. I remember the debate as the police agencies in Arizona were starting to, Phoenix PD and others, where it was going to be a really mass usage of body-worn cameras. And the cops were worried about privacy issues, and which everybody understands, private conversations. But even then, the prediction was, over time, it's going to be so beneficial to law enforcement because the public is going to be able to see the actual interaction. Now, it's not a 3D image, but you get a picture of the language and the demeanor, and especially on DUI arrests, when they give the sobriety tests with either body-worn cameras or dash cameras, you can see the behavior. And I would imagine there's a lot of suspects that never go to court in a DUI once they and their lawyer get to see the video of the night or the day they were arrested.
Yep. I had the head of the Illinois State Police Union tell me no cop wants to wear a body camera until they've worn it for 30 days, and then they refuse to go on patrol without it.
Right.
Because they realize, look, everything, new stuff is scary.
Yeah.
You know, oh, they're going to micromanage me, et cetera. But one of my favorite was actually I did a ride-along with a Phoenix cop who told me that he was arresting a woman who was, on drugs. And in the process, the two of them were alone. She was partially clothed. And she looked at him and she said, well, I'm just going to say you raped me. And the officer said, well, ma'am, I want you to know this is being recorded on camera. You can say whatever you want. And he said that completely took the temperature down.
Right.
And he said, look, man, that could have destroyed my career. Because if you don't have a record, it's a he said, she said.
Correct.
And that can be a career ender.
Or at least a stain that never goes away.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just unproven. That doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
Unless you have the video.
Right. 100%.
So the business, we touched on this a little bit. The business part of it, you have expanded to a value of $1 billion and a worldwide presence. What's next? As far as is there a bigger place you plan on taking this to?
Yeah, I actually, for the first time, and this is going to sound crazy, I can see $1 trillion market cap, which is wild because I think 10 years ago that didn't exist. Apple was the first. And the reason is what's happened is we have found a series of problems that are connected. So we started with the taser. Then we made body cameras. Why? Because when cops use a taser, people are concerned how they're using it. And other force. If they shoot somebody like Michael Brown and Ferguson, you get very different stories about what happened. Well, let's just record it. Okay. Well, then once we record it, what do you do with the video? Well, we're not going to put a VHS player on a cop. So we got to have digital media. That led us to doing cloud software. And cloud software is just basically, it's what the world has moved to.
Sure.
Right? Remember the old AOL discs? You used to get software in the mail on a disc. You don't anymore. You open your computer, your phone, you go on the internet, you download it, you share your pictures over it, you put all your money is in the cloud, meaning it's stored on a server by a bank somewhere. You can log in, you can do bill pay. Bringing that to policing was also, everybody's like, hell no, we can't put police evidence in some cloudy, fluffy thing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the concern there was data security. And it turns out us running on Microsoft's cloud where they spend $1 billion a year or more on security, and we have a big information security team, compared to a local city police department who might not even have one person who has a full-time IT job who's not over at the city in another department. We could help them do security better. So just give me the idea. And now we're one of Microsoft's biggest customers worldwide. I think we've got the largest repository of videos. I believe we're bigger than YouTube because we have 1 million cops uploading 2 hours of video every day. Now, YouTube's got a lot more viewers than we do, but we have a lot of contributors that are putting a lot of stuff up every day. And then we do digital evidence sharing. We run the digital evidence backbone for the country of Scotland and for the federal attorneys in the U.S. We do drones now. We bought one of the world's leading tactical SWAT drone makers. We bought the largest counter drone company called D-Drone. We now protect all the NFL stadiums. And obviously with what's happening in Ukraine, that's a huge business, how you detect small drones and how you mitigate them. We have a huge AI opportunity. And look, that one we got lucky on. We didn't go invent amazing AI stuff. That's just happening. OpenAI and Microsoft and others are. But we're in this fantastic position where it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. We have eyes and ears on every cop's chest. And what if we could take that information and listen to it and look at it with AI, and we can do things like, hey, we can write the first draft of your police report. Cops absolutely love it. And it's like effectively for a big police agency, it's like increasing your manpower 50% overnight because cops spend half their shift writing reports.
Yeah, it's not like you see on TV.
Ugh.
You don't have a shootout in the street and half an hour later you're on another call. Those reports take forever.
Yeah, they call them shift enders in some cases where they're like, I'm not even going to pull over and deal with that because I'll spend the rest of my shift writing a report. So we're automating that. We're doing real-time translation. So this launches here in a couple weeks where from a body camera, you can be talking to somebody. You don't even have to know what language they're speaking. You just go, hey, I need a translator, and the AI will translate for you back and forth. So we're in this amazing position where we've built relationships with law enforcement around the world, and we can now layer all these AI services on top. And for cops, it's great. Look, for a lot of people, they're worried, is AI going to take my job? And with police, we're like, no. It's just going to take the half of your job that sucks, that you hate, like writing reports and dealing with bureaucracy. let AI do all that and allow you to be a better human, just be a cop interacting with people the way you need to.
Do you mind talking for a few minutes? I want to keep this all positive, but about the fight in the world headquarters because I know it was very personal for you. So do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Sure, no problem.
I remember you vividly saying, I want to make it very, very clear, and we'll tell the backstory in a moment, but I want to make it very, very clear that we are not going to leave Arizona, that we are only leaving if we're pushed out of Arizona. Because it meant a lot to you to stay here with your world headquarters. So I want to lay out and tell me if I'm wrong. The basic fight was you did everything necessary to build your world headquarters, get the permitting and the zoning changes so that you could add retail and residential into the world headquarters to build kind of a community.
Yep.
It was all approved through the city, went through zoning unanimously, I believe.
Zoning unanimously, yep.
And then it went through the majority of the city council. You are ready to break ground, literally ready to break ground, and all of a sudden you get hit with this signature petition that happened, and now you've got to stop.
Yep.
Am I right about that so far?
That's right.
So then you decided that you were going to fight to try to stay here because, am I wrong, in other places, especially Florida, we're ready to not only welcome you with open arms, but financially help you to move there?
Yeah, they do tax incentives. Most states try to stay humble when I say this, but we've built a company. Our average pay in our Seattle office in particular for tech jobs is over $300,000 a year. Like, these are the kind of jobs states stumble over. And we had a lot of people reaching out to us, but yes, we did want to stay in Arizona. Now, what was interesting.
So why?
Yeah. Oh, I love it here.
I do too.
Like, a lot of this is just.
But you yourself can live anywhere.
Yeah, my wife was down for Florida. She loves the beaches. If I'm totally honest, she was kind of hoping this would go the other way. But look, we've got a big footprint here. We've already bought the land. We've already done the design. We're going to build a spectacular. The building looks a bit like a Star Destroyer, super high tech. We've got an entertainment district dialed in with 7 restaurants. A great live, work, play lifestyle. And so, one of the reasons I want to say, look, I love Arizona. We've got a lot of employees. It'd be very disruptive for them to have to get up and move their families. And we'd have to start over. And I've been working on this for a decade. So, I didn't want to have to go hit the reset button. Now, what's interesting, I didn't realize local politics, man, it gets pretty messed up. The way this started was there were a couple loud voices that are like, we don't like development in Scottsdale. We want it like it was when I moved here in 1960. Well, hey, things are either growing or decaying. We can't go back to the 60s or the 70s. You need development and high-end jobs to continue to grow and support. I mean, look at what's happening in Japan with population decline. Yeah. Or I lived in Sarasota, Florida for part of the pandemic, and God bless, I love Sarasota.
It's beautiful.
It is, but it's turning into a retirement community.
Yeah.
And when that happens, there's this downward spiral. You don't have enough tax money to invest and grow. Anyway, what happened, so we had a couple loud voices that were like, we don't like this development, and particularly because we added apartments. And I need apartments because when you hire young people right out of college, they're not ready to go buy a house. And they don't want to live in suburbia. They want to be able to live near their friends and walk to work and walk downstairs to the restaurant and the gym. And so that's what we're building. So we had a couple, I would say, sort of the NIMBYs. I don't want this thing. But the muscle behind it, we got approached by a California hotel workers union. And basically, they were flooding petitioners into Scottsdale. And they wanted us to sign a unionization agreement. And the whole thing just felt icky. And we're like, well, why would we sign this? Are you going to get these petitioners off the street? And they said, well, no, that's not us. That's worker power. It's some other group. We're like, well, if you can't, no, I'm not going to sign some agreement with you if you're not even going to commit to not mess with us. I think I've learned subsequently that it may be that if one group makes the threat, you might be getting close to extortion if it's do this or that. That's not a legal analysis on my part, but it just felt weird. And I think people were being careful.
Yeah.
But it was a shakedown. And so we said, no, we're not doing that. And so they flooded Scottsdale with out-of-town petitioners. It was crazy.
I remember.
People were my wife got accosted at the grocery store. And of course, she's 5 feet tall, but she's dynamite in a small package. She's like, what are you people doing here? This is my husband's company. I was like, calm down, honey. When she told me about it later. Anyway, so 93% of the signatures were gathered by paid-for people that were not volunteers. This wasn't, the opposition.
It wasn't a grassroots.
It wasn't the people of Scottsdale rose up. No, California union flooded activists into town and gathered a bunch of signatures. You pay people enough. Look, people just want to buy their groceries. They're going to be nice. They're fine. I'll sign it. Just leave me alone.
But there have been local politics. Matter of fact, I had a conversation with the mayor of Scottsdale who said very nice things about you. She said she thinks the world of you. But the opposition to me seemed to be a little odd because one of the things that they talk about in their defense is, well, we have this project going on and this project going on. And I said, well, if you have all these projects going on, why say no to this one? And you're also saying you're going to say yes to future projects as well. So it's not like we're full and no more building.
Yep.
So did you ever take it personal that it was this project?
It started to feel pretty personal. And I would say, look, yes, I talked to some of the politicians in Scottsdale, and yes, there's apartments within 5 miles, but none of them are walkable. Like, if we bring 5,000 jobs to Arizona, and 1,000 to 2,000 of those people live on campus, that's 1,000 to 2,000 less cars during rush hour traffic. And for the demographic I'm going after, these young kids coming out of college, they don't want to buy a car. They don't want to commute to work. Like, they're just coming out of college life. That's why every big tech company I compete with has a campus, because it works for bringing people to start their careers at your company.
If you look at the way the industry is going as far as the building and with these multi-use projects, the Paradise Valley Mall project built right around that same premise of residential, commercial, industrial. Look at the old Metro Center Mall project. It's got the same kind of a layout with the idea of there's a generation of people that would rather be able to walk than to drive to where they need to go. And this seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, it seems to be the expansion of the same idea, but in Scottsdale. Yeah.
But nobody has done something like this in Arizona. There is not a single tech campus similar to what we're building. Right. So I think, look, we don't have the benefit of people seeing that it's worked. I would also say, look, I talked with some of our more prominent Republican politicians at the national level. I don't know if I want to call them out by name, who just explained to me, said, hey, look, Rick, business needs to be more engaged. Back before the Trump tax cuts in 2017, business groups were pretty engaged in politics. And then for some reason, it seems like it was like, oh, okay, like, we don't need to fight so hard anymore. But what's happened in the last couple election cycles, social media has elevated the loudest, angriest voices. And so what was happening in Scottsdale, the politicians, what they're hearing are the activist folks who show up at every meeting to yell at them and who bark at them on social media constantly. But if you go out, like the Chamber of Commerce put out a poll run by Signal, the group that does a lot of Trump's polling, and they found Scottsdale residents favored our project by a margin of 65 to 25. That swamps any presidential election history. That's not just a landslide. That's like a mega land. It's a tsunami. Mm-hmm. And yet, unfortunately, the Scottsdale City Council and Scottsdale's electeds at the state level have all fought against us. And I think it's because they are hearing the loudest voices in the room and they're not hearing what Mr. Nixon called the silent majority.
Do you think, though, knowing you as I know you a little bit, your personality seems like you're looking for resolution. So is there going to be, you are going to be a big part and a fixture in Scottsdale with this project for decades to come. And so is there going to be room for a meeting and a resolution and a rebuilding of relationships with those people?
We know we have to get a good relationship with the city of Scottsdale. We're going to need their help with permitting, et cetera. We've had a few meetings, and my point to them is like, guys, focus on running the city, not running me out of town. Like, let's go. Let's move on. So we are having some discussions, but again, so far it just seems social media has been challenging for politics because it rewards angry behavior way too much, and I think that's the thing we all just need to get past. And look, Axon and me personally, we're going to be a lot more involved. I've heard the call that business needs to step up and be more engaged and not allow the loudest, angriest voices on social media to drive policy, because that'll drive bad policy.
What's interesting about that, maybe along the same lines, is I've maintained on the air that I think that they talk about corporate. It's always price gouging and corporate greed, and so it's going after wealth as if somehow there's always something negative attached to wealth. And I've always wanted wealthy people because the wealthy people that I know are the ones that are the most benevolent. It seems to be the entrepreneurs that want to help the next generation not make the same mistakes, and the investment that they have in their community. You look at Bob and Renee Parsons and what they've done in the community with their foundation and others, that those are the people that are truly benevolent. I wish they would defend themselves more. Go out and be willing to say, we are contributors and we've always been contributors. We just have more zeros in our bank accounts, but we're contributors to our community. I wish they would defend themselves more.
Yeah. As I've risen into some of those ranks, as the company's become successful, I would tell you, there's also a sense, a lot of times you don't want to be seen as like out patting yourself on the back and drawing, kind of putting a target on yourself. Like for the haters, like Taylor Swift says, haters going to hate. And sometimes it feels unwinnable. I do think you're right that, do you want people that are successful or not? Like in whatever society, like successful people drive change in whatever endeavor they're in. And so I do worry that there's this sort of anti-success, and whether it's financial or anything else,
right.
In academia, there's this whole, unfortunately, the last few years, we've grown to just celebrate victimhood, where everybody's either an oppressor or an oppressed. And it's like, well, where does that lead to? That leads to, just the mob of, if you don't want anybody who's successful as a leader to step up, we're rewarding anti-success, which is just not good.
Well, and you do such a good job of defending the company. Like the times we've talked, and I've heard you speak in public about this fight to keep Axon in Arizona. Do you feel compelled to do the same thing about you personally and other people like you? I mean, I'm not asking you to pat yourself on the back, but you're a philanthropic person and you look out for the community, and I know you do a lot. Don't you think it's time that people understand that we need organizations and people here that are going to continue to do that have the means to make real change?
So yes, I certainly do engage in the things that I care about. And look, as you hit more financial success, no longer need to make money to buy the car you wanted or to put food on the table. And so it does allow you to sort of focus more on more conceptual things. I would say for me, one of the things is I'm kind of the right amount of famous, to put it in a weird way. My customers know who I am, my employees. The thing that's most important to me is my family and my kids. My kids aren't seeing enough of me right now, but other than that, we have a pretty good relationship. I would not, I don't want to be the guy that goes out to a restaurant and gets swamped by people, whether they're fans or haters. And so I think there is a little bit of a sense, and especially, the last 5 years post the pandemic has been just a wild ride. And I think there's a lot of folks who are like, I don't want to attract a bunch of haters coming my way. I'd rather play it a little low key.
Well, I appreciate the time. The story is so interesting, and the humble beginnings part of it with just a dream and an idea and the no quit attitude of 7 years before you reach success. I think a lot of people would have given up a long time before. So I think that's a great motivator for people. But I appreciate the time. Your willingness to always say yes to a conversation, to me, with as much as you have going on and as many balls in the air, you always are willing to say yes to the conversation. So I really appreciate it.
Well, two things. First, my wife would be the first to tell you, I love to hear myself talk. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, but you can do that anywhere.
Yeah. And then the other thing, actually, it is funny. I have to correct you on one thing. I was not humble beginnings. I was actually... frankly, I had a little bit of arrogance and hubris when I started this business. I thought, I'm all that.
I meant humble in the sense that you were in a garage with one other person and an idea of you had to sell him on selling his idea.
But I would tell you this, the universe has taught me some humility. Because I've gone through some phases where after we found success, I thought, okay, I'm like the Steve Jobs of law enforcement. And I launched 4 products simultaneously. They all failed. I almost got fired.
What were they?
It was the 3-shot taser was too big. Arizona State Patrol bought 1,000. The union sued not to wear them because it was big enough. It was giving them back problems. It couldn't fit in the patrol car. Our first body camera was way too complicated, way overpriced, so that failed. Luckily, we stuck with it, and the second generation worked out. We did a shotgun round, a wireless shotgun round, brilliant piece of technology, failed as a commercial product. It was a little too buggy. Tech wasn't fully ready. And then we did a non-lethal area coverage weapon for the military. And we launched them all at the same time. I only share this to say that the universe has taught me, like, stay humble, man. Because when you think you got it right, that is when bad things happen. And so especially when you're riding high and things are going well, that's when you got to be, okay, I got to play. I got to be a nice person. I also actually do worry about with my kids. I've heard not to swear on this show, but I don't want my kids to grow up to be little jerks. And when you have a reasonable amount of wealth and you see it in people, like, number one, as an individual, you can become a jerk. When you're the CEO of a big company, like, people will a lot of times not tell you when you're being a jerk. They just put up with it. And then your kids can be even worse. For God's sakes, I don't want my kids growing up to be little unappreciative jerks. And I'm really proud that so far they haven't. And I think that's part of what I've learned in my journey is just no matter where you at, you got to be nice to people. Don't get too full of yourself. Even today, like, look, people assume I'm smarter than I am because the company's been successful. Like, my hit rate's, still 50-50. And, especially when I'm dealing with smart people who've thought about something more deeply. And so I would just say, never get too full of yourself. And stay curious. Nobody knows where the world's going. Like, with all this AI disruption stuff, everybody has a lot of opinions. I just have to remind myself, I'm full of opinions, but I don't know any more than anybody else about where this is going. So you just got to stay curious and stay humble, and things work out.
Well, it seems like it's working out pretty well. I mean,
I've been on a roll the past like 15 years.
$50 billion value in your company. I think you're doing okay.
Oh, man. But now, at 4,500 employees, the thing that keeps me up is now I'm disruptible. I'm the big guy that some small, scrappy guy in a garage is coming after. That scares
someday.
me.
But I think at some point you would welcome that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
If there's somebody out there, you would tip your hat, wouldn't you?
I would. I just go disrupt somebody else's business first, please.
Well, I appreciate the time today.
Thanks. I appreciate it being here.
All right, listen, the Amazing Arizonans podcast are specifically for stuff like this. Started his company in Tucson, has grown to an international footprint, but wants to keep it here. Keep watching these episodes, and if you like them, let us know. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Amazing Arizonans, presented by Resolution Copper. Tap the button in the middle to subscribe to KTAR News.